Asato ma Sadgamaya Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya Mityorma Amritam Gamaya. From untruth lead us to truth. From darkness lead us to light. From death lead us to immortality. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Prema Svarupalara, embodiments of divine love. I welcome you to part number 2 of my saga, evolving around a film script, around Whitney Houston and Sri Satya Sai Baba as the avatar of this Kali Yuga. I'll take you right back into the story where we left off in part number 1. So you might recall that I received a phone call from the lawyer Thomas Weisenbeck, representing NIPI, Whitney Houston's management in New York City at the time. This phone call caught me by surprise. I didn't expect this kind of recognition, and I did not fully understand the agenda that was unfolding behind everything at that particular moment. Thomas had the following to say: Wolfgang, you are going to meet Whitney, but before this meeting can take place, I have a few questions that I need to ask you. So I volunteered in answering his questions, and we parted with him telling me that he will follow up with me and make arrangements accordingly. I was now feeling some kind of excitement. I felt that, after all, this vision of mine, this film project, might actually find the attention of Hollywood and of Whitney, because I wanted her to play the lead character. I continued my spiritual practices, which meant to go to bhajan sessions where we sing spiritual songs addressing all the names and forms of God that are out there in the universe. A place where you, in an occasion where you charge your batteries. Usually these bhajans take place on Thursday evenings, and at the time the Lighthouse for the Blind was housing the Satya Sai Center in Manhattan on 59th Street and I think Lexington Avenue. So that particular Thursday evening, a gentleman gave a speech, a film producer from Los Angeles. He gave us his experiences, some of his experiences that he had with the avatar in his professional life and in his personal life. Very entertaining, to say the least. But what was catching my attention the most was the very fact that he was an established film producer from Los Angeles. I positioned myself in such a way that Bill would have to cross my path once he left the stage. We started a conversation. I kind of forced that, of course. And I let him know, listen, Bill, I have interest from Nippy. And I have a lead role for Whitney Houston, potentially, in this evolving, unfolding film project. Bill got excited. We met the very next day for brunch. We signed contracts, him being senior partner, me being junior partner in this film project. And we had a handshake on Wolfgang playing his own role, because the film is very autobiographical. So the level of enthusiasm and euphoria grew within me. And 2 weeks later, I met a gentleman, Kevin Skinner. Kevin was a businessman from New York. We met at a bar. I entrusted him with what I was involved in, and Kevin told me, listen, Wolfgang, I know the family Houston very well. I do business with them. I said, Kevin, that's interesting, but let's not take this further here. Let me stick to this professional route that I have established. A week later, I receive a phone call from Bill. Bill is telling me, Wolfgang, do you know who Thomas Weisenbeck is? I said, well, he's the lawyer representing Nippy and Whitney. Wolfgang, he says. He's a problem solver. What do you mean, problem solver? You are a problem in this project. I said, wait a minute, Bill, wait a minute. Are you telling me that you want to sacrifice my role so that the movie gets done without me? Bill says, yes. The movie needs to be done with or without you. I hang up the phone on him. I needed to digest his stance. And I called him back 8 hours later and I said, Bill, listen. This movie is not going down this road. I insist on playing my part. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that was the declaration of war. I had no clue what would unfold from that decision that I made. The decision was made to frame Mr. Kshatriya as a person who is potentially dangerous for Whitney Houston. And I had no clue how sinister the energy field would become, or had become, from that moment onwards. I took the opportunity to fly to India to seek guidance from Sri Satya Sai Baba. I spent 2 weeks in his ashram, recharged my batteries, got my inner balance to a certain degree, and went back to my hometown Papenburg only to open the newspaper on a certain morning breakfast, and lo and behold, Whitney Houston would give a concert about 100 miles away from my hometown. I was flabbergasted. Why would an artist of her status, of her renown, give a concert in a small village called Halle, Westfalen, with a stadium that would accommodate 18,000 people maximum, whereas she could fill stadiums with 80 or 100,000 people easily? Didn't make any sense, but this was the divine play. So yes, I booked a ticket because I wanted to see her for the first time in my life, because I loved her music and the inspiration that I received from such. And 2 days before the concert, Bill, my ex-senior partner, calls me and says, "Wolfgang, listen, if you show up at the concert, they will imprison you. Thomas Weisenbeck just called me and asked me to warn you." I said, "Bill, wait a minute. Is it a threat? And why would Thomas Weisenbeck not pick up the phone and call me directly? But let him know I will go to this concert." I went. And my intuition told me, okay, when you step onto the concert ground, you introduce yourself voluntarily up front to the security guards and let them know that you have arrived. And that's what I did. I said, "Listen, guys, I'm Wolfgang Kshatriya. I'm not a stalker. I'm here to attend the concert." And they knew who I was. And I was friendly, escorted backstage. Whitney was on stage rehearsing. I could hear her voice, I couldn't see her. And in this little room backstage, I was sitting opposite the head of security, next to him the lawyer Thomas Weisenbeck, a lawyer from Düsseldorf, and 2 bodyguards. And the head of security said, "Wolfgang, Whitney loves her fans. We want you to know she doesn't want to have anything to do with Twin Souls, the project." I said, "Sir, that's no problem. If that is her decision, I wholeheartedly accept that in resignation. However," I said, "I know from the Brown House production," mind you, Bobby Brown was her husband, and the Brown House production was a production house in Los Angeles. And they were in communication with me, and they said that Whitney never got a hold of the treatment. So obviously a decision was made, an artistic decision, a decision of artistic nature beyond her knowledge. And I found that strange, and I let him know that this is what I have been told. The head of security got really angry now, and he ordered the lawyer from Düsseldorf to prepare a letter that would frame me as a potential threat for Whitney Houston, and he should send that letter to my hometown. And I was told if I make one more attempt to come close to Whitney Houston, they would lock me up in prison. Well, I was alarmed, and it registered with me. Before I left the room, I turned around one last time and I looked into the eyes of this head of security and said, "Sir, I hope you're making the right decision." But he ordered me to leave the compound. I said, "I hope you're making the right decision, because if not, it will backfire." I said it in a very gentle tone, but I meant it. Karma can be a bitch at times, quote unquote. I was not allowed to attend the concert. I drove back home, received a phone call. In my disappointment, my model agency in Milan had an assignment for me. So I flew to Milan, and while staying in Milan, I made the decision to once again fly to India after my assignment, because I wanted to once again and once and for all get clarity into my mind, into my heart. Peace of mind was needed, and I wanted to know what God had in store for me, with or without my project. So I booked a flight. Now listen carefully. On the 5th of October 1999, 5th of October 1999, from Frankfurt to Bangalore, South India. On the 4th of October, I drove a car from Milan via Zurich to Frankfurt to get to the airport. At a gasoline station in Zurich, I see a little CD, the newest album from Whitney Houston. Up until that time, I never bought her music, but I felt compelled to buy this new CD and to listen to it while driving. On the back of that CD was a little note: 15th of October, concert in Zurich. That meant 10 days from my departure to India. Now, my heart, honestly, my heart was telling me, you will be at the concert. My mind said, you're crazy. If you go to that concert by any chance, you will certainly find yourself in prison, because you would violate the rules set by Thomas Weisenbeck. I mean, I'm not stupid. And to prove to God and to Nippy and Bill and everybody in the world that I am not a stalker, I on purpose sat in the plane on the 5th of October 1999 to fly to India, knowing that I didn't have the money to make some kind of arrangement to fly from Bangalore to Zurich to be there on the 15th of October to attend the concert. It was humanly impossible for my little budget that I had access to at the time. And I planned to stay in India for at least a month. So I go into the spiritual routine, the spiritual sadhana, the workout, meditation, bhajans, inner work, cleansing, yoga, vegetarian food, and satsang with the people that God would put on my path. And after one such darshan, I come back to my hotel. It was the 14th of October, mind you, one day before the concert. So I'm on the roof of this hotel. And a gentleman starts paying attention to me, and he calls me to his table. We have a chat. He seemed normal. He was a professor of IT from Vienna, Austria. Now he was suffering from a broken heart and came to see Satya Sai Baba for cure. But another cure that he prescribed himself was to drink a bottle of whiskey every day for the last 2 weeks. He was totally intoxicated with alcohol. But he would eat peppermint on an hourly basis so that nobody would smell the alcohol. And he managed to think straight, which was the most bizarre thing. Because usually people would just, I don't know, go into some kind of delirium or start talking nonsense. No, he was an IT professor with a very sharp mind. But I saw the bottles. He showed me his room where he would rest. And it was full of empty whiskey bottles, so I knew he was telling me the truth. Now, this IT professor made arrangements to be hospitalized in Vienna on the 15th of October, and he needed a travel guide that would help him to reach his destination. He asked me whether I would help him, and he would pay for everything: the flight, the plane ticket, the hotel. Nothing to worry about, and the return ticket to Puttaparthi. Now I decided to join him. I took it as my selfless service, especially after he was begging me on his knees, crying like a baby that he wouldn't make it without me. Now the flight itself from the international flight, business class, was very entertaining, to say the least. And in order to entertain him and kind of manipulate him away from the little whiskey bottles that he was still swallowing as his last supper before going into this 1 week sleep and detoxification, I told him my bizarre story with the film project and with Whitney's management. And I let him know also that, strangely enough, on this very same day that we would arrive in Vienna, Whitney would give a concert in Zurich. So the IT professor looks at me in the plane. Says, "You got to go to this concert." I said, "Are you crazy? If I show up there, they will lock me up." No, Wolfgang, you have to go to this concert." I said, "This is impossible. Are you crazy?" And he said, "Listen, when we arrive at the hospital in Vienna, my friend will show up there at 12 o'clock noon. She just finished a spiritual kind of training. She knows how to identify the inner voice, the divine voice, and she will help you to come to a real decision based on divine guidance." She used the Phyllis Crystal method. And yes, she came, and yes, I took this exercise with her, and yes, the decision was very clear, crystal clear, so to speak. I had to be at the concert. Everything was paid for by the IT professor. Not only that, he also invited me to fly to New York from Zurich once the concert was over to finish some old pattern. I shouldn't say old pattern. It was a relationship that hasn't been fixed with a closure as of yet. So he encouraged me to fly to New York, spend a week in New York, make closure with this one relationship that I had, and then fly back to Puttaparthi. He spent altogether $4,000 for my journey. And yes, I arrived in Zurich on the 15th of October at 7 p.m. I was in front of the concert hall. The concert was sold out. And out of nowhere, some individual approaches me and says, listen, I have a ticket here. I don't want the black market price. You pay the normal fee. I was in the concert, somewhere Route 25 on the floor. Whitney was 1.5 hours late. And she sang her song from The Bodyguard. And the song goes like, I will always, no, you are not what I need. It's part of the song from The Bodyguard. In that moment, my heart burst open, and I told her in her face, that's not true. The music stopped. 18,000 people are in suspense. Whitney couldn't continue singing for 20 seconds. She looked into the audience, trying to identify the person who said it. I was invisible to her. And I was invisible for the head of security, who was standing backstage, staring at me. Nobody touched me. Nobody locked me up. I felt tremendous relief from my shoulders because some past life karma was lifted from my heart in that very moment. For me, that experience was kind of a closure. I come back to that at the very end. So I could go into my hotel, I could fly to New York the next day. For me, the Whitney story was done with, but not for God. Because what happened now, when I came back to New York, I had closure with this lady that I was in love with. Her name was Michelle. We had a decent closure, and after this 1 week of staying in New York, I flew back first class or business class to Puttaparthi. We are now beginning of December of 1999. And my inner voice is telling me, Wolfgang, there will be a Christmas play, and you will play the role of Jesus. Now, I thought this is my ego trying to be important. So I didn't go to the audition. It was a Hollywood director who would direct the play. Children would be on stage, adults would give their voices to the children. And for the role of Jesus, for the voice, they chose a gentleman by the name of John. I offered my services as a runner, somebody who is carrying the cables or doing the errands while the production is unfolding. And we would be allowed to go to darshan in the afternoon. This John walks next to me after darshan. We're going back to the rehearsal session. And John tells me, you know what, Wolfgang? Baba just told me I'm not supposed to play Jesus this time. What are you telling me? Oh, he made it very clear. I played this role last year or the year before. This time somebody else is called to play that role. So I entrusted John with the fact that I am an actor and that the director could check my voice, and if he feels that this is a fit for the role, I'm willing to do it. To make a long story short, indeed, I became the voice for this Christmas play, and I will show you the video link once I'm done with this recording underneath. We played in front of 30,000 people in the Purnachandra Hall. And it was an amazing experience. Very, very moving, rewarding for me. After New Year, I flew back to New York City. And what is unfolding now, I will share in part number 3, because the story is now culminating. As crazy as it has been so far, I say, fasten your seatbelt and listen to part number 3 of this journey. Namaste.